We had a lot of talks already this morning and this afternoon, so we had already a good connection with all those people here. And I think what today was the topic was thanks to Danilo, the director of Polimoda, idea of doing this fashion displacement. And we had this idea to talk about the gap between fashion education and industry. Now, I think that as an introduction, I have to say that education should be and is sometimes, not always, the home for freedom. I mean, from 18 years, you come there and you want to find a new family and a new way to learn and to express yourself. Freedom of thinking, freedom of behavior, freedom of escaping probably sometimes very boring courses in the university or in your bachelor degrees. Now, on the other side, the industry, and we have both sides here, the industry is becoming more and more demanding, so that we have to be more and more linked to success. The pressure is becoming very high. And so it might be interesting also to have this debate between the two, if they love each other or they hate each other, or if we can bring them together in a better debate and to have better results and a more serene environment, because there's a lot of stress and pressure. So this is something that emerged suddenly by some articles in BOF, but it was not really a good timing. But I think it's important to go to this debate and see how we can find solutions to bring creativity to a better understanding. I'm going to present my panels here today, and I'm very honored to have Christiane Arp. You know her from VOGUE Germany, but also a believer in young talent, as you push and promote designers here in Berlin. On my left, a protector of a heritage, a Florentine heritage, a fighter for her integrity in a brand that Emilio Pucci has a long history, and part of the LVMH group as a smaller brand, but as a strong identity. And I know how much you believe to protect this integrity. There is a strategic thinker. I call you like that. I found my words there. Christopher, you're a retailer as well. You understand retail. You work at Barney's New York. And so we want to see also from your part how you see education and how you can critique. It's a matter of not only being euphoric about what we do, but we like to be critical today. I mean, we have to be critical. I met Sam Cotton here a few years ago in the Woolmark contest. And Sam is also the designer, typical fighting for his integrity, going to an interesting time because you were successful in London. You split up the brand, you stopped, and now you're again very motivated to do something new, and we will talk about that later. Branko, I discovered we have a lot of in common. We are both hybrids. We are not really, we don't have a title, you know. We are hybrids. We both studied fashion in an Academy of Fine Art. We searched, we found fashion as a kind of energetic field, and that's why we jumped in, but we don't know where we're going to end. So that's okay for you. And for me, but still, we had a good idea a few minutes ago. I'm very, very happy that Johan is here, König. I mean, art is also related to the industry, more or less. Of course, fashion is more in that commercial field, But I feel that you, Johan, you are very special, coming from that art world and expressing yourself, giving that platform to artists. And maybe also their education is probably changing. And maybe I can start with you. So I introduced everybody already. You're Branko, you're the hybrid, the creative director, let's call it like that. So maybe we can say that my first topic is going deep, flying high, a new beginning. I think we need to study the different techniques to acquire knowledge and to transmit knowledge. And I want to ask my first question to Christiane and say, how can we improve education so that we can understand better and have a better performing result at the end? As an observer, you are the observer, and you could say, I feel this is missing.
I think that freedom, and you said it before, yeah. I think my ideal world of education means that these young, talented people, they have freedom, and I don't see that. I think that there is already too much pressure.
Yeah.
Do we give our best and do we have the best result when there is too much pressure? I don't think so. And of course, designers that we look at, we have to see something. We have to have this. We have to see this own voice and this, and hopefully you are able to protect this own voice. But what I miss is, especially here in Germany, when it comes to education, I miss this freedom of thinking big in all kinds of fields, and not this and just I have to do this because then I'm able to do this. And so just having already all these walls around you, which I think is never good for the best design results. So
yes, we are too many.
Creative freedom.
We are too many, and fashion education became a business, and we are not having that personal debate anymore, that personal conversation. Education is a conversation. It's not teaching.
How can you? I mean, we have more than 40 schools in Germany, up to 30. So every single year we have more than 1,000 young people who are looking for a job, and oftentimes, like forming their own brand means it's the only way to work. It's kind of an escape, way too early for my opinion.
Yes.
Then here we see that a lot of these young talents, they study in Germany, or maybe they don't. They leave the country right after school, and we never see them again. And can an economy like Germany really afford to let all the young creative people leave?
Where do they go? Where do they go normally?
They go to Italy, they go to France, they go to the US, they go all over, which I totally understand, because I think that we didn't find the right format for the best education yet.
Yeah.
But this is the big challenge that we see in Germany now.
No, most fashion schools, we have a lot of courses starting from businesses, communication. We all have the different, especially in the school in Polimoda, we have a huge program where we offer all the possibilities to escape. If you're not becoming a good designer, you can escape. And also, Lodomia, my second question was to you. How do you feel about educators transmitting knowledge? Because you are there, you are in the classrooms now, you are transmitting knowledge. And is it changing during the years, or do you think that transmitting knowledge is not based on the time we're living, but it's a kind of permanent methodology?
I thank you for the question, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My viewpoint is we are only as good with the education as good as we are to educate, and there is a big gap, and this is what's worrying me today, between who's educating and the kids. I think the education in the older days, and again, I know nothing of education, so it's just ideas I have. You were looking up at the teacher. And I think that's great to have respect for the older ones or for your teachers, but more and more, what I have tried to do with my company and to bring to the young is to listen to the young. And so the roles, in my view, have to be turned around a little bit. And it's not just about what we know, the experience is key, but is where the young generation, that is our future, is telling us and listening. So to answer to your question, the little bit I've been able to teach, and thank you so much for allowing me to do that at the master class last year, was to have the young ones tell me what they wanted to do, why they wanted to learn, what they wanted to learn, and allow them to speak. And it sounds an easy exercise, and it's actually not. Because when you're asking people, tell me, they're not used to it. They're much happier to hide behind a book or hide behind something else. And the moment you ask them to act and to come in front, there you start seeing who has a thought, who doesn't. And after a while, when you're doing that exercise, it becomes very interesting. But I think the base is listening and trying to understand what answers they need and what answers the industry should give them. So that's our responsibility, to offer them an education where we are offering the path for the future.
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting. We have a lot of applied projects, so the industry is more and more in our educational system. But the reality of the business, of the platform, is still another thing. And I wanted to ask to Christopher if you feel that new brands have the experiences to enter your store, Barney's. Do they have enough knowledge to perform? Do they have enough knowledge of what you require of them? And are you ready to embrace this ignorance?
You know, there's never one approach that it's been with each vendor that we've been able to bring in. Because when you're looking at so many different categories, but whether it's shoes or jewelry, it's cosmetics, it's designer ready to wear, every strategy is different. But you know, for us, we know that there's the growing pains of it. And so when we bring someone in, we're letting them know we're also your mentor. So we're going to guide you through this entire process. One of the things I would say is a challenge for most people when they get the call and we say, hey, you're joining us, is they've never had a business mind or had to have a business mind up to that point. And you'll have a designer who's a designer and they're very good at designing. And so now they have product on the floor and they don't understand, well, wait, I don't have as much square footage as this particular designer, or why am I placed here right now? Oh, wait. And so then they get into their head and it's a situation where now they're second guessing themselves and now it becomes combative in certain terms, because there are down to the eaches, once you are placed on a selling floor, what does that look like? And so while you have made it, you really have to have a business mind to go, okay, this is my sales per square foot. And you have to be able to even come back at a buying team and go, well, my sales per square foot is this because this is what you've bought into. And I think if I had this much more square footage, it would result in this much business. And that's rare that you see that with a new brand coming in, and it takes some time for them to get there. And I think in education, where it's missing is that level of understanding key performance indicators to your business. So creativity is amazing, But you now have stepped into a world where you have people that are looking at numbers, they're looking at quarter analysis, they're looking at weeks of selling. So all of that language all of a sudden is coming at you, and you don't know what that means, right? And so that's the challenge, and where we're able to guide people to success.
Do you still need that creativity?
Absolutely. And one of the being at Barney's, I think we are that. Like, we're innovating, we're creating all the time, and that's what makes it fun. You don't have to have one and not the other. And I think in education, I think, from the time we're this big, you have some adult uncle or Auntie May who ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we make some declaration of what we want to be, and then everyone puts us on this path, and then we've decided that we've committed to being this. I'm a creative person, and you can change, and you should be well-rounded. I grew up and I wanted to be an actor, singer, dancer. I'm not doing any of that.
Did you try?
And it's okay that I changed. And I used to say to people all the time, I can't stand numbers. And it's funny, my whole life is generated around Excel half the time.
Yeah.
But, and I have to be okay with that. But also going into my creative spirit and going, how do I create new learning modules and create new ways for us to strategize to bring the consumer in and to develop new designers?
Can you develop new artists? Johan.
First of all, I would be very interested. Are you teaching this at the school, like to understand how production works, what turnover numbers you have to reach before some product is successful? Is this?
It's all divided in fashion courses.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of
Economics.
Maybe Danilo can speak better about that. We have business courses where they have to understand design, but it's now to you. You can better reply to that.
So. Everybody for being here. Thanks, Linda. And just for answering to your question, quite recently, I think it was no more than 2 years ago, we introduced 2 more departments in our school. So we have fashion business, fashion design, design management, and art direction. And this was for covering all the hybrids that might be required from the industry, but also at the same time to be more specialized in every department. And at the moment, yes, we do. This is the answer. Because teachers come from the industry, and because Polimoda is in Florence, so it's well surrounded by productions, and all teachers come from the industry, so they teach what they learned themselves the day before. I think this is not even a question for ourselves, because we give it for granted. The question that we have today, and we pose this question since years, is how much creative can be that job? Because if you look at the business, a few years ago, the fashion business was stuck. Because it was all based on numbers and performances and marginal growth, while the real growth comes when you invent a new market that was not existing before. So with Linda, a few years ago, we started the business department that in school was not existing. It took 5 years to grow it. And the approach we have in business is creative. So my message is, right, we talk about designers, and designers are supposed to be creative, but sometimes they are asked not to be from the industry. At the same time, we can say businessmen are supposed not to be creative, but we want creative businessmen. So I think the distinction is not between business and design anymore.
No.
It's all about the whole fashion, the whole industry.
Business creative as well, isn't it? I think that's the thing. I think people struggle with the term business as it being something that's quite formulaic.
Yeah, this is another.
Business can be as creative as art can be, I think, at times.
Yeah, other example, yeah.
And that's the problem that we had when we started our business, was that we looked at business in the same way as universities would kind of declare it as a separate part of your subject. And then when we got a brand, and we were like, how the hell do we manage this now? Because we don't know how to do it. Whereas actually when we started go along with our brand for a while, we were like, actually, we can be creative with this, actually. So.
Yeah. What we want to do, just for completing, is not forcing a designer to be a manager. So when when the discussion also on magazines, newspapers come, and also in the rankings, they ask how many hours of management you put in your design courses. 0. If you want to do something else, which is management, we give you management courses or hybrids that are supposed to be that. What we do actually is to let them work together since the beginning. When you mentioned applied projects, you know, like a designer working with a manager, a product manager, or a communication manager, and they work together, people from different, you know, departments, and with the support of an external, which is a company. So we let them work together, but don't force anyone to be what they don't want to be, rather giving always a second chance. So if after 1 year you realize that you are not what you were supposed to be in the beginning, you realize that you are more into something else, give the second chance. That's why
That's a bit
the
the
offer growth,
philosophy,
because you know, you have
Yeah.
specializations, you have, you know, a designer can be a star designer in the future, yes, maybe yes, or maybe after 1 year realizing that there's something more interesting for him or for her, like, I don't know, like nice sweaters. Isn't that fashion as well? It is, no? So give that chance to people.
Yeah.
I mean, chance, going back to freedom. Freedom and chance go together.
But isn't the expectation nowadays that a designer is able to know about both business and design? Is that what
Merchandising
is-
comes in. The merchandising comes in very heavily, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, you don't have to be an expert in the field, but I think you should be knowledgeable to know the language and the terminologies that are coming at you, because you're much more empowered, and you become a more empowered creator at that point. And it keeps people from taking advantage of you, so you can own what you have. I am completely against the idea, though, that if someone's not good at something, that they focus on what they're not good at until they're good at it, which in the US is how the entire education system is. If you're really, really good at something, they're like, yeah, that's great, but you're not good at math, so focus on math for the next 6 years. And you're like, but I don't want to do that. So, but there is a point where you should have knowledge of certain things so that you can bring it to the table. I think what you're doing at Polimoda, where there's the collaboration between groups, is extremely important, because in the fashion industry, that's really what it's about, is collaborating with a lot of egos. So, and navigating that.
Yeah.
I think there's certain things, I mean, we kind of touched on this just before we left the back of the room, but I think you raised the point that was like, how, if you're in Barney's, can you sell your brand with a small rail where you can only fit a certain amount of clothes on? Now, I believe that is something you should be able to do. I believe if you're a good designer, you could sell your brand through one piece of clothing. And I think there are a lot of designers now who think more of the business itself, and that's when it starts to become complicated when you're a young designer, thinking about how you merchandise this brand. I don't think when you start at that point, you should be thinking about that. I think you should be thinking, I've got one chance, one garment, I need to put all my thought into this shirt. Like, how am I going to make this shirt have my philosophy, my draw? And I think that's when it comes back to the importance of identity. Because if you're sat in a university where you're thinking about how do I please loads of different people and how do I merchandise this and stuff, it's going to kill your creativity.
But it's interesting, like a lot of people, you never get to ask business students, like, how are you dealing? I mean, how many people study business and actually never make a business? So, and somehow fashion designers are always posed the question, like, how are you dealing with your business strategy? Like, I mean, I created a nonprofit organization without any business. I never made a business plan. You know, it's like, so how do you make something from being, I would say, like creativity, and at the end of the day, you need in all fields. Even you're studying law. A lot of people study law, end up being a taxi driver. You study, you know, people somehow think that only creative people from the art disciplines never, you know, manage to make a living out of their profession, but it's in all fields.
I mean, that's why I was asking, because in the art school, there's no such thing as getting ready for the real life. So it's like a real extreme, almost like a soft, cloudy atmosphere of total independence and freedom. And in Stedel School in Frankfurt, where I was like associated, somewhat of a guest student, not really, but somehow like surrounded, it was really like classes with one leading professor, but there was no such thing as training of how does a business model work, how do you make a portfolio. And I think that's a lack there, although it starts to show that the younger students are so focused on becoming a successful artist and very driven by Power 100 lists and almanacs of what's, I don't know, Taschen's Power Up, Contemporary Art, whatever, where every artist is like minimized on one page. I'm sure that's existing in fashion as well. And that's, of course, a little bit of a problem, because I think the goal, I guess, also with fashion designers or artists or architects, they should, maybe architects even less because they're more like of service, they should start their studies with a very open result. I don't think that an art student is an artist already. There are chances to become one, but maybe it's a great landscape architect in the end, or a fashion designer, or musician or so. And I think that this independence is very important to find your own language and what you really want to achieve artistically. But of course, you always have to refer to what has been done. So that's necessary to be like trained in that field. But I must say, I often realize that it's a really hard fall for visual artists after the school, because the reality then usually hits in pretty hard, because there's no once school is over,
there's no follow-up.
Yeah, and also there's no like training, you know, like almost like a re-socializing training of how to don't expect to be an artist. I think that's maybe the most important. I don't know. I guess it's the same with fashion designers.
Where does that expectation come from within art? Because is it an ego thing that develops through the Because personally in fashion, I don't know whether, I mean, I personally didn't, but I never thought of myself reaching a certain point. I kind of had a goal that I was going to work towards. After I left university, I was like, right, I'm at the bottom. I've got to do the worst things. I've got to intern for the longest hours possible. And it's like, I don't know whether a lot of people in fashion expect to be somewhere else, but I would have thought art might have had a similar sort of, right, I've done my courses, I'm going to start from the bottom, I've got no money. Especially, I thought with art, it's the classic struggling kind of career, isn't it?
Oh, sometimes, I mean, it's interesting when I sometimes go to when the artists I represent, some of them are teachers in different art schools, and their classes invite me to give them feedback on their work. And often you can see there's like a star of the class who already has like self-organized exhibitions and is like a good networker and so on. But often you can tell that this won't really go somewhere.
Yeah.
But that the most shy person is making the most sensible work, and where I see the highest possibility. But the biggest, that's why I didn't become an artist, because if you choose to be an artist, that's a pretty big decision you can't navigate with, which I think maybe in fashion, if we think of the latest examples, what makes it great is a great business model, you know, to take what's there, twist it around, add a zero to it, and sell it, you know. So, and that's actually what makes it great. And then also you show that you wear it, that you have the money to buy it, and that's another. That also is the same case in art, but that comes 20 years later usually, or maybe now with a speed economy, maybe like 5 years later. But as an artist, you can't like. There's not so much possibility of navigating around the. Artist is an artist. A fashion designer is an artist and a consultant and a strategist and a businessman. Of course, artists are also businessmen, but first they have to get what they have to do.
Well, the thing, the challenge with that, I think, is across the board. You know, when you go all the way back to just your whole process of going through school and just life, by the time we get to a place where we do feel we have our freedom, it's at university, right? It's that moment that you're like, I'm gonna be who I am. Unfortunately, you have no clue who that is because everyone else has told you who you are. So then you have 4 years of actually it's quite interesting what we've done to ourselves. We're saying this is our freedom and who we are when we're in university, and that we're making this declaration of what we're going to be, but we're discovering who we are. But we know who we are. We know that we aren't who we were when everyone was telling us who we were. And so in that, when you are in a state of trying to create, the question on deck is, if you are creating, how do you create at your best if you don't have self-awareness? And when we talk about art schools and we talk about fashion schools, there's no course about self-awareness. It's not there. There's no course that you go to and you understand things like, what is your color personality? Are you a red? Are you a blue, yellow, green? What does that mean? Are you more of an aggressive person? Are you this? And so to kind of start to bridge that gap to know how you want to create. And I think once you do that, and if we have that at some level in education, then when it comes to people stepping into the real world, you step into it much more dynamically. And the problem is that they're stepping into it, and we don't even get to that point till we're like 35. And everyone tells you that too. They're like, oh my gosh, when you hit 30, it's gonna be great. You're gonna feel so comfortable with yourself. But I wanted to feel comfortable with myself when I graduated. You know, at 24, I wanted to be like, this is it. You know, but it took, to my mid-30s to get there, and I think we don't do that enough in the education field, especially when it comes to creators.
But for me, the gap, is exactly there. You come out of school, maybe you're not knowing exactly what you are or the opportunities you have, but it's the workplace that eventually kills you if you're not careful.
Yes.
Because they tell you what to do, not respecting new talent coming in, but forming talent for their needs and for their peers. And so the young ones, that's a little bit what I fear and what I feel, get put into a situation, they're told what to do, lots of late nights fixing jobs nobody else wants it to do. And by the time you spent 3 years, if you had any talent or any creativity, if it's creative or business creativity or whatever, it's by then hashed out because this is the way we have to do it. And that ruins creativity and talent, even if you have it.
Absolutely.
So,
but isn't that changed now with the new social media possibilities and the local markets, and you have I don't know, a small producer somewhere with your
listen,
unique...
I don't know. I can only speak for what I know, being Italian. We don't leave the young ones have a word. The older ones have a word very, very late in life. And it's very interesting because before coming here, I had asked one of the girls that I had for Central St. Martin's last year to tell me what her year was about. So she wrote me a letter, and I'm just going to read the first lines because it's a little bit sums up the conversation of what it means. She says, during my final year at Central St. Martin's, my fellow classmates and I got told to lower our expectations for postgraduate opportunities, with our head, of course, strongly advising that we should all have backup plans that included jobs in retail and restaurants. And now she is running basically all my heritage team in Florence, and she knows everything about fashion history, all about things, and she's coming out with great ideas. And so she wrote me lots of other nice things, but basically the expectation was nothing, because we are not able to let the young ones express themselves. So I'm not sure, when they come out from university, I'm not sure they're as mixed up as you think. I think university gives them a better opportunity. I think the job is tough. It's like when you were saying, you come out of the art world university and you end up in the real world, and then what happens? God knows. So my feel is we have to work more with the schools, start telling the schools what we need, listen to the kids, and bring them into our world and make it a soft process.
But it also, last year I did a minor worked with second-year students, and the first lesson I was like, okay, what I'm going to do with them, and I really wanted to get to know them. Like for me, being able after 3 months to say something about their process can only be related to who they are as a person and how they've been involved. And they were really a little bit in the beginning, oh, this is weird. They prepare to to talk about the designers they like. But at the end of the day, that's not going to help me to understand who you are and to help you specifically, because there were eight people and all totally different people. And also like there's this I said, like probably none of you will become a fashion designer as we know in traditional sense of the word, but that's okay because you can be anything else. It's about, I mean, education should just finding the spark in the person and trying to guide that and process that in the right direction, and then basically taking away of the pressure of expectations of the world that we are supposed to and be the successful designer, because it's totally okay if and talking from my example of being an okay student and also having had the fights with the teacher because I was not doing what they wanted me to do, but then I was like, okay, I'll just get my diploma and do it after I finish. I'll have my freedom, and I was strong enough to work with that. But then so a lot of people from my class that really like did what they were been told, and now they're not doing anything. They're just, some of them even are now a nurse or real estate agent. And I was like, oh, how that
But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
It's not, but like as I knew them as who they were, I also had the feeling that they were not given the opportunity to discover some other fields of their potential.
That's why you are here also, Johan, because art education might be more interesting for the moment than fashion education. So maybe fashion education should turn the page and find a new way of educating generations. 68 generation to now 50 years, a lot has been changed, but in fact that multidisciplinarity is missing for the moment. So can't we open a new environment where we talk like today on different moments where the industry is there as well for us? The industry is important. Your art industry is important as well, but there is a difference in approach.
I think it's more about first of all, there needs to be like what's called creativity, or you can call it an idea or concept, and as an artist, as a designer, and there are similarities like appropriation is a big issue obviously right now in fashion. That has been an issue
absolutely
10, 15 years ago in art. Like Barbara Kruger, one of the most important appropriation artists, is a forming figure of Supreme, and like picked up on this, and I think then the next step is to think about a business model. I think art, of course, is again Supreme, for example, a high demand and low supply, which I think is a big miss if it was like artificially created or by fact that they couldn't produce fast enough to supply. But that's something from the art world, because you can't, if you're a painter, you paint 20 paintings a year, end of supply. Even if you try harder, you can't deliver, price goes up. Similar, or like demand goes up. In our case, price goes up. And these things are very important to know and to understand. And there's no successful artist who isn't fully aware of the situation. They like to say, like, I'm only the artist, but they perfectly know how the system works. But before you get there, you have to know what you want to do. And I think, and that's very hard to find out. But it's the same if you study philosophy, sociology. I went to business school one day and went to the and they told me only 20% of you who are here will make it. The rest will fade, will be falling off the track before the end of the Grundstudium. And I thought, I don't need that. Why like some soccer coach type of guy telling me that you most likely will fail anyway? So I skipped that, but I don't think that studying art means you become an artist, studying fashion means you become a designer. But they know that, and I think we also shouldn't treat students too softly, because it's not
an easy job.
Life is not soft, like getting somewhere. It's like it's hard work.
Yeah, it's hard
work for all of us.
Yeah.
But then I was just going to say, like, when you talk about this idea of artists having to become sort of have this realization that they do need to earn money and they need to be alive, the same as fashion designers need to earn money. And that's when you start questioning this idea about how much like economic things like neoliberalism and capitalism and stuff is actually driving the creativity of people now, other than the fact that it was the other way around before. Because now if you think of like, for example, students who are designing, they're obsessed with trying to get into roles that are going to either help them get into another brand or start their own business. But if they don't have the opportunity to then think outside of like making money, like that, rather than just looking internally at themselves and working out what are the things that I like personally. And I think that's what killed it for me with things like the way sort of the government's running it, or like neoliberalism is happening.
Yeah, I think you're initiating the second part of the debate. So
Okay.
But you're from London, right?
A little bit on education.
You're from London?
London, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's I think even more problematic in London. In Berlin or in Germany, we have from my understanding, a little bit better system with social security for artists, and it's thank God, a little less neoliberal.
But if you look at people like, I mean, it's a classic example of people like Hearst. Now, Hearst, they're like driving art through a team of people who are putting that stuff together for him. And it just seems like it goes against the idea of what I ever imagined art was about. Like, it seems like his approach is all about capitalism in that sense.
Part of the art, yeah.
Yeah, and that's sad that the economy...
Art of making money.
Yeah, it's just a shame that it's the same with fashion as well. It's the expense of other people, and that's when you spoke about before about art itself being something where you spend a year making 20 paintings. Like people have worked out the way of kind of like skipping that idea and then going straight to making money.
Well, I think the money comes into play, especially when we in the U.S. Once you leave university, what you're actually looking at is amount of debt, and so it's so much that you step out of it and you know that you want to be creative, and you went to this art school to be creative and to really hone in on your talent. But then the other side of that is oh my gosh, my student loans or whatever that looks like for you, and you've moved to a city like LA or to New York or Chicago, and now it becomes a thing where how do I make my creativity make me the most money I can so that I can prove to everyone that my decision to do this was lucrative? And we've created that, right? In our own education system, we created it because we've made it so expensive. We've made it expensive for you to be creative. So when you leave, you better make money doing it. And that's a huge amount of pressure when you don't realize that when you're in it. You know, and I think
about pressure now. The word is there, pressure. I mean, is the industry understanding education? Do we receive enough feedback from the industry? Is the industry helping us and the younger generation who wants to perform? I would like to ask you, Christine, how do you feel that the industry is perceiving creativity, and how do you think they can help us in a better way?
I think it's creativity is the word, but I think that is not what the industry means. I think it's about new ideas, but at the end it's there is a black suit, and that is what you need because your customer wants the black suit.
right.
And I think that the industry forces young talents, I only talk about young talents, but I think it's the system.
Yes, of course.
Forces to young talents to be there right away and not develop them. I think that we talked about own voice. We look for the own voice. That is what I tell, some of them are here, they all know that I tell you all the time, follow only your heart, not my advice. And if somebody is in front of me and says, Christiana, I really appreciate your opinion, but I think no, then I know that this person is able to maybe go the way. Because to say no to the editor-in-chief of Vogue when you're just starting is wonderful, I think, you know, when it's a design.
I agree, I totally agree. That means you have a point of view.
Yeah, and I think...
Do you not think it's difficult now? We talked about this earlier before as well, the idea of like what everybody is surrounded by now, like with social media and with these goals and aspirations that you're expected to get and expected to do. And I think millennials now are kind of seeing what other millennials are doing and building for themselves and expecting more from it. And I think it's really hard when you're surrounded by SEOs and Googling the same images and like going on Instagram and seeing how like people are aspirational people that are dressed in a certain way that you want to aspire to. All it's doing is just filling everyone with the same homogenized imagery and views.
It's like Pinterest.
Yeah, and it's like you're just building the same Pinterest board as about 1 billion other people, and then you're going, okay, how do I research now? Like nobody goes into libraries. Like this is something that I've been really preaching to my students, because in my spare time I lecture on anthropology and philosophy, and my view when everyone has these projects and they're told to like think deeply about stuff is they go online, they research stuff, and they go on Wikipedia and they find out about things and they read little snippets. And I'm like, no, that's not how creative thinking comes about, because even the sort of tactile expectations.
But that takes time. We're all talking without keeping in consideration time, and time and creativity go hand in hand. Today, my
but they
fear...
don't have time anymore.
Brava, exactly.
They don't have
point.
time.
The industry
right away
today doesn't have
serve.
time.
But do you
this
think
is the ugly thing.
But people still have the same amount of time as they used to. It's just the fact that they think they have.
No,
less
the
time.
industry goes much faster, I think.
How about if you're,
there is a gap. There is a gap that we have to close between the slowness that education needs and the fastness that the industry wants.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
There
When
you
you
go.
get to industry, then you can't.
Yeah.
And
right.
so we need time to educate.
And
but there
time
is
to
no
create.
time
Yeah.
anymore for the industry, because they want to every day something new. So how can we close the gap? That was a bit also the discussion. Danilo, how do you think we can close the gap between slowness and fastness?
Well, I think multidisciplinarity is a key, but we told already, like making them work together means, industrially speaking, skipping some steps of the process while doing good things. But this is quite obvious. From the educational point of view, I think that we need some lateral thinking. So instead of thinking in terms of fast or slow, we have to think, how deep is it? Like, for going back to what you said before, they are not used to think to themselves as an identity properly. They don't have time, or they're not used to. I remember last year when we launched the final, project for showing their collections. The theme was "Tell me about you." So simple, right? Tell me about you was the theme for our fashion designers to show. And they said, "About me? Yeah, about you. Who are you?" So they were so used to please someone else and to, go to the fashion show doing certain things for being there, that they forgot that they had an identity to show.
Right.
So we forced them to show what they are, also because this is beneficial for the whole fashion, because fashion is not clothing, despite someone else is saying so. Fashion is not clothing. And fashion includes also the game of mirrors that we have between one person and another. We understand who we are if we challenge someone else on their identities and vice versa. So this is a game of fashion, no? And so tell me about you can be the designer showing his identity, but also challenging the audience to understand their identity and so I think the point is not how fast or how slow, but what is in the middle. So what is in between me as an identity and you as an audience, or as a brand, or as a final consumer as an identity. And the same we do in the business courses, like in brand management, when we start saying, okay, now let's start and study the archetypes of the different brands. Is it the archetypes? Yes, the identities of the brands. And the way you have to study that, first of all, is to understanding yours. And they go crazy. They are not used to. Like, maybe I don't know if it's the industry, if it's the society. We don't ask people to say who they are.
I think it's society who changed, definitely. We are not able anymore to take time to become who we are. So it's going so fast that we are becoming somebody else, and we don't know how our identity, we're losing our... So how can we rediscover our identity? I think you have that special project of Fashion Clash. I don't know if it's a solution, but you can tell about
there
that.
There is a thing also when we talk about the industry, always I think maybe it's good to be clear what do we mean with that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a gigantic industry that makes a lot of money. And that's, I mean, it's a capitalistic system. And at the same time, why a lot of people love fashion, why people start to study fashion, is because the immaterial value of fashion. That is exactly this non-verbal things we are communicating. I mean, we are sitting in this room all being, we wear clothes, and they all have somehow relationship to who we are. And it's like, how do you learn young people to develop another way of looking to the world and how we behave? So the consumer behavior, of course, the industry will look at what the mass wants, you know, and how can you, as a creative person, change a little bit of how we look at the world. That's what creative people can do. They see things other people can't see, and they can show that. And with Fashion Clash, we always try to, it's like there is this, we are like the bridge between education and the starting points of starting a business, and want to really keep this experimental field open so they can still experiment and develop further things they could do at school. And most of the time they say that was such a great thing to be part of it, just that I had a feeling I could still develop my voice further without being graded in school, you know, like you have to get your diploma and things like that. So I think, yeah, as Christiana told in the beginning, like to give platform to the freedom of expression. I mean, when I graduate, I was 21, you know, but it was still like, you know, getting money from parents and couldn't afford to pay your rent and things like that. So there is like, how do you find
your identity? But is it not important that we look at scientists, anthropologists, people who can learn us from other fields, how we become the person we want to be, and understand how we can express ourselves?
Exactly.
So I feel that fashion education in itself should be reformed, and starting from a first year where we now, today, we'll meet together with people from the industry to define what a first year of fashion education should be. I think it's the moment is right for it. And I'm sure you are going to be there as the philosopher. I'm sure you are going to be there, Branko, to open our minds. I'm sure that Ladomia is going to talk about the heritage and how you can bring it to the contemporary and see how we can defend this kind of heritage. I'm sure that we can understand the media and break it open, not only to speak about fashion, but more about a moment in time that we are living today, sociologically, geographically, because we have like sometimes 90 different nationalities in one classroom. How can a teacher, a faculty member understand all those differences? I'm sure that Danilo will find a new course in his little tirelire one night, and I'm sure you will go to have a different platform in your Barney's shop for this new project. How do you feel about this? Is this realistic, or am I dreaming?
I don't know. I think it is realistic. I think. Well, I mean, the university I'm at the moment, Condé Nast, they're specifically a business fashion university. So I think they're one of the only kinds that specialize just in that rather than design. And for me, I found that quite interesting when I went to work there, was that I could kind of curate a course that was just a history of kind of the biggest issues of what is going on now. Like some of my lectures are things like, is gender a social construct? Like what is it to be a man? Like what does it mean to be a man? Like all these points are stuff that nobody really talks about. And this is the problem, I think. There needs to be a conversation within universities now where the students feel like they know how to converse back. and they understand what the problems are. Because I had very similar problems where in my first year when I was there, and we had a project where we had this designer who was she was a friend of the dean, and it was a very, very confused business model. It had loads of different inspirations. She had like about 30 different points that you could point at and say like, it's punk, it's future, it's da-da-da. And I got this, the students were supposed to like try and rebrand her and come up with a way of like redirecting her kind of inspiration. And I was like, look at what you've got. You've got like every single thing you'd want to look at. And I know it's quite confusing, but just pull bits out, work out what it is she's doing, and then put it down on paper and come up with a new idea. And they just couldn't do it. They could not work out how to dissect something into like the sort of principles of what the brand was. And I remember...
That's styling, anyhow.
What's that?
Styling. It comes up to styling if you want, right?
True. But when they couldn't look at something and go like, I was going like, do you think it's like there's some punk element to it because she put stuff together? And they're like, yeah, there's punk elements in it. I'm like, and it's a bit futuristic. Yeah, it's futuristic. So I'm like, they're like, future punk? And I'm like, yeah, if you want to go there, but that's it's trying to getting them to try and have that kind of way of thinking. If they can't think about themselves that way, they're going to really struggle to think about a brand that way. And it's understanding your brand. If you want a student to come into your brand, you want to know what your philosophy is. You want to know where they design from, where all their thoughts coming from. So when they design, they've got your customer in mind, they've got your history in mind, they've got your heritage in mind. And if they don't understand how to do
but then if you pour too much information, then you block them, so you have to let them be. If you leave them too free, they're going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's the only word I haven't heard around the table today is teamwork. And that's why, I pull out the idea of the stylist, or I pull out the idea of other people that work with the creatives. And you have, by now we were saying earlier with Christopher, in the old days you had the designer. Today you have probably 20, 25. And that is the most difficult thing, working with people.
Maybe we should bring all the courses
it's
back in
learning
one.
how to deal with people, how to speak to people, how to empower people and make them work together. Because that example you were talking about, if you're a good listener and you know what you're talking about, you can pull out the best from that person and turn her into probably a star. If you are a big ego, you come in and you say, I'm not interested in that because that doesn't correspond to what I need. It's a little bit difficult. So, and that for me, in our world, and I'm talking for the industry, and time, we don't have much time to create teams. You're losing people all the time. New people are coming in. So that's a big, big challenge, is working with people and teaching the young ones to believe that they have a shoulder on somebody else that's probably going to help them, tell them what they're good at, or pull that in. And I think if you can find little teams of people, it's fantastic.
What about that sort of idea of course? Sorry, I was going to say the kind of the idea of course collaboration, like
Bravo, that's what
multidisciplinary, because that's how you end up working in reality anyway. So why can you not just have a fashion student working with an art student working with a textile student?
Yes, that's a nice laboratory that we are thinking of.
LVMH, Station F.
Yes.
I think that is just...
It's genius.
Yeah, they started the new project.
To not think in fashion design and industrial design and put everything together, learn from each other. I think that is the future, and it won't be. I don't believe that we still want more. I think we want less, more precise.
For us, when I was, you talk about training and developing any new hires that come into your company, and then the existing team. And we discussed this earlier. When I was looking at our training module, I was like, we have to rip this whole thing apart because it wasn't relevant. And so when we looked at that and we said, all right, how do we want to educate our teams? And so, the first thing was I had an idea about it. And so the whole program is called IDEA. And it does not, when you first come into the company, we don't focus on talking to you about product in this first module of training. This is actually talking about motivation of people. Why do we do what we do? The intention. Why do they push open the door to a store, or why do they go online? Why is that happening? Why do you do what you do? How does your ego play into it? Because in that way, we're creating an experience for the client. But the other part to that is there was no longer selling associates doing the module, managers doing another module, our merchant team doing a module. That went away. Everyone was in the same room together. And what we found is it's really interesting. You have the merchant team, the buyers, in the room with a selling associate, and now all of a sudden they got tons of information because they're like, wait, what? The client does what? Wait, what do you mean? That's what they're saying? And so you're in this forum where everyone's going, my pain point is this. And so you go from that being your pain point, and then you go, well, we can change that pain point. Oh, I understand that. We can evolve and we can create something new. The problem is that doesn't happen a lot of times till you're in the work environment. And so if it's happening already in university, then when somebody's put into that room, I mean, for my company, it's 95 years old, but we're quite small. So you will be in a room with our CEO and our CEO presenting, and you could be director level or manager level. And a lot of times they're petrified because they haven't had this interaction with other departments. And that's what's really needed. Like from the industry side, I would say they need to have that.
Do educators have to be present at those meetings? Educators, our educators.
I think in the university atmosphere, absolutely. But, for us, for me, I am there because, in our company, I'm there and I'm part of it. I think the tricky part for educators is not necessarily, it's what they're providing while they are present, right? Because you can have people that are present in a room, but what are they giving to it? And a lot of universities have people that have a lot of academia behind them, but not the real world. And what does that look like when you're in a board meeting and you have IT, and then you have the creative team, you have the merchant team, you have the operations team.
Yes, but I'm talking about closing the gap between education and what you are selling.
Absolutely.
And how are we going to close the gap?
But they have to be there, but they have to understand what that looks like for the industry. So if they've only kind of been laser focused on one thing as an educator, they're going to have to broaden their scope as well. Otherwise, there's no point. It won't go in any direction.
Well, I think we brought the industry inside education, so maybe the industry can bring education inside the company sometimes.
I think there must be something now that we can bridge each other's domain. Also for Christina, press, media, how do you perceive education?
In general, or for the fashion?
Fashion, education. I would like to skip that word fashion, yes. And go to education.
I think education is communication as well.
Yes.
And I think that if you do what I do is kind of a communication.
Yeah.
With my reader, constant communication. As a designer, it's constant communication as well.
Yeah.
And what I wear, as somebody said before, is communication.
Yeah.
What I have in what car I drive, which car I drive, what I have in everything is communication. And it's education as well, I think. And I expect somebody, my idol is the little island that designers still can be. Like for me, the Japanese manage, or somebody like Dries van Noten, for example. Somehow I see them on their islands, and once in a while they leave the bubble and show us what they created, and then they go back. And I think that I wish I see more designers who have that, but think of that they serve us with what they do. I still love fashion. I still love the idea of the perfect coat and the perfect dress. And I love the idea that there are still some designers who are able to serve me with that. That is my expectation.
Yes,
that is still my.
It's a beautiful dream.
I know it's a dream, but
yes, and I agree. I'm also dreaming every day of that. But I see that designers are commodities. They are going to put from one company to another, and especially now in the last few months, all those people have to change identity suddenly and give another input and another result with the same brain. So how are we
But you
treating...
think that is the right system?
No. No, I don't think it's the right system.
I don't know.
I actually think it is. I kind of
You
like
think
that.
it is? Okay.
I don't feel
that's a
bad with
debate.
that because I feel bad that these designers, none of these starts up their own business and wait until the moment they are called to be treated like commodities, because it's an easy way out. It's much more difficult to start up your own business.
Is it, Sam?
Sam?
There you go. There you
Is
go.
it Sam? Sam was successful with AG and Sam and the whole London atmosphere. And I think you had a lot of opportunities from the Woolmark and so on. And you were successful and you had a lot of press and so on. But
I'm kind of drawn between both of your arguments, obviously living it. So when we started a brand, we came out of university, I studied fine art, and then I went and interned. I specialised in sculpture and textiles, and then that ended up going into working. I think I interned first for Alexander McQueen, and then when I ended up leaving there, I just worked for another couple of places and didn't really. There wasn't any jobs because it was just a recession had hit. I didn't know how to kind of get into that industry that I needed to be in. So me and my friend were just like, should we just make a brand then? Because there's no other jobs. So we made this brand and we had our own particular identity that was about youth and fun. And that's why I kind of agree with certain things where when you work inside houses, it sculpts you into who you are. And it might be negatively, it might be positively. And I think that experience is like reading a book or watching a film. You're inherently going to pick up stuff from them. So what we learned was that we wanted to have fun. We didn't want to take it too seriously because we worked in some places that were pretty insane. And then we started doing it, but what ended up happening, because we were so young, is we both changed. Like, I grew up, Aggie grew up, we were both young hipsters in Dalston, like, getting drunk all the time, and then we both became 30 and realised that we were interested in a lot more culture and art and philosophy, and it just kind of, the brand didn't fit into our lives anymore.
Yeah.
So when we decided to split the brand up, it was really difficult, like, because we had to go through it. It was almost like kind of losing something that's been with you for life, like a family member or something. But it was a new part of my life, and I obviously I'd learnt a lot from it. But I think it was beneficial for us at a certain point going into a brand so early. But also we hadn't really learnt enough about ourselves to do a brand as well. So it's like, I don't know when is a good time. Some people do it straight away. Like one of our friends, Craig Green, he's like, he went straight in after university. He had a clear vision. He knew exactly what his identity was. He went in, he laid it all out, and he does that thing that I always think is very, very important with a brand, is when they have one item in front of them, you can look at it and you go, that's Craig Green. And you can hang it on, you can hang one of those pieces in Barney's and it will sell, that one piece being there because it's Craig Green. And that was what Mandela was like. And it's like, I think that's what is really important. And I think we always keep talking about identity, but I think the most important thing about university is you go there, you work out what your identity is. You might not have worked out what your identity is, so don't start a brand. Because if you haven't worked out what your identity is, don't start a brand.
Human resource managers, they recognize your talent?
What? Resource managers? At uni, or I don't know. No, not really.
No, they wouldn't.
I don't think they understood it, really. I came from a fine art background, so everybody kind of looked down a little bit on fashion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been more welcomed by, because I didn't study in London, I studied in Cornwall, so I've been more welcomed by the kind of London universities and kind of companies than I was by my Cornish university. So.
Branko, how is the industry reacting to your projects? Fashion Clash, but also others that you do. Do you have support? Do they understand what you're doing?
Yes, I would. What I always like when it's talk about multidisciplinarity, for me, it's not only within the creative world, but it's also the healthcare and it's like anthropology. And it's so interesting. I think, or like, why isn't there an anthropologist in a fashion house?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think that should be such an interesting. People are doing research, but then they don't know how to do proper research. Yeah. So finding. So I always say, like, there's so many fields where people can work in, and I mean, there's so much going on within technology and.
sustainability, I mean, name it.
So and somehow I think because of I'm living and working in a small city when there is absolutely no industry, and that we had to find our own ways of collaborating. So through that, on one hand having a vision, on the other hand trying to find other opportunities, actually led us to be able to. I mean, we did a project. We did developing projects in Africa. We did projects with refugees. We did projects with seniors involving crafts and textiles. So it's like so many fields that they're so interesting to bridge the worlds together.
Can you bridge a world like yours with your algorithms who tell us what we have to buy?
Yes, I mean, yes.
No.
No, I mean, yes, absolutely. And no, honestly, because for me to understand what someone walking through the door is wanting, I have to understand people first, right? And I actually study a lot about the history of how we are, our tribal instincts, why, things that we did when we were in a tribe society, of course, a silly example is, if you say, there was always like this thing where, why do women always go to the restroom together? And so everyone's like, why do women always go to the restroom together? Like if you're out at a bar, one girl, if she goes, I'm going to the restroom, another one will say, I'll go with you. Or she says, who's coming with me? And it's because when we were in our tribal instinct at that time, when women went to the restroom, because of how they used the restroom, someone had to watch their back. Right? So just go at the same time. That's always continued. So guys, we never are like, hey, you come into the restroom with me. He would think I was strange. So you need, that's a very silly example, but to what was just stated, I do need that to understand the behavior of people, to understand the why behind how we speak to them. It goes all the way from that to mapping technology.
You speak always about your customer.
Always.
You never speak about the designer.
And here's why. No.
Why?
No. There's no reason. I love the design. I work with the designers.
But the DNA of the designer, the person, what he wants to express.
Right, but here's
is that
me, it's the consumer
important to you to understand what you're on the floor? You have on the floor.
I absolutely have to understand it.
Are you going to in the showroom? You talk to the people. You go in there. In their working place, you don't have time for that. Come on.
No, absolutely. It's what we do. So if we don't understand who the designer is, that's why we curate the looks we do. So we have to understand what they are relative to what our consumer is. So what's fun for me is especially the new designers, when they email me and they're like, hey, do you have time to meet? I need your thoughts on what's going on in the store. At the end of the day, they want to sell their product. And I can't speak to them about what's going on if I'm not with them. So, and for me, it's fun. To the point where I've said to them, I'm like, we need to do an event where the jewelry designers are together with ready-to-wear designers, because I think that the way jewelry designers approach the business and design is something that a ready-to-wear designer needs to understand. And then we also do events where we have the consumers come in.
Yeah, Barney's is a kind of department store where there is still that personal approach.
Yes,
I
because
guess.
we are not a department store.
No.
Well, we're special. We are a
specialty store.
And so that is why if you experience us, it is so curated and well thought out. You never walk into it and feel overwhelmed by just loads of product, because we understand that level of how to connect a designer with the consumer in the right way.
But sorry, to your point, Linda, I think in my experience, normally when you can bring the designer to the customer, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Of course, who is presenting and making the curation of the store is key, and all the training, but the excitement that the presence of a designer, if it's a handbag designer, shoe designer, ready-to-wear designer, gives it a whole other level of excitement for the customer. And that, I think, is a tool that we all use, and it's always very, very effective, actually, right?
Absolutely. I think, when we look at the success of trunk shows again and personal appearances, and,
Dinners
last
and
year, if you
lunches,
saw,
yeah.
you know, for us at Barney's when we did the drop in New York was huge because we had 40 designers that came into the building and we dropped different installations and different product throughout the day and highlighted it through social media. And we did a panel discussion with Greg Lauren and Virgil from Off-White and really had, you know, all the consumers that were able to just come in and hang out. And it wasn't about them buying. Right? It wasn't about them coming into the location to purchase. It was about them coming into the location to get to know the designer and who they connected with. And that was really important for us.
And it's so much fun to be there.
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
You love it, no?
It's
They ask the
amazing.
most incredible questions. Everybody wants to have a picture, a signature of something. It goes on for hours.
Yeah, so fashion is still creating a dream.
I think it
Yeah.
can, but I think doing this, it's so important what you said, is that the designer has to know who we are, who she is,
Right.
and who is my design for, who is my customer, to explain why he, she does this. And I think this should be part of the education as well, to do this kind of communication. And I sometimes miss that. If I say, who is the one that you are addressing? Who is she?
No, they don't know. Is it because there is a lot of copying and appropriation?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think at the moment
Me too.
the industry is kind of depicting to people what is wrong about design, I think, at the moment. Like the fact that there's so much like self-referential notions within design, or even references of different brands in the same brands, that it then makes people think that it's kind of okay to do. And that's why there's so many brands now who are like doing stuff that looks exactly like something else because the big brands are doing it. Or the students in university designing stuff that looks like the big brands because the big brands do it. And if everyone's just being self-referential, I mean, we talked about this before, I remember when I first spoke to you. Nostalgia, to me, just seems like what all designers are looking at. And I think nostalgia is an easy thing because everybody loves nostalgia. They love looking back to the past and reminding themselves of these things. But I think what that's done personally is it's stopped people looking forwards. And I think that kind of lead from designers looking forwards probably stops students look as further forwards. And especially when they're just covered with information from social media and stuff. It's hard for them to look that far.
Yeah, but there's, Danilo.
Well, yeah, there's a lot now.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Let's say, when you asked before, shall we look at other domains rather than fashion? And yes, lately I'm watching a lot of National Geographics. And there I learned that you cannot teach elephants how to fly. So the first point, going back to the first year of a beautiful program, the first point is teaching our students 2 tracks. The first is technical. So understand who you are in the industry. What is your job? What is your domain? What is your expertise? Because don't forget that people need to know how to do things, right? The second is cultural, because appropriation is a substitute for knowledge.
Absolutely.
So you don't know anything, you steal easy.
No.
You know, so
Agree.
these are the 2 tracks. So when people learn these 2 things, they also have to learn how to work with others. So, and this usually happens already in the second year, where we mix the programs, but actually we don't mix the programs. We mix the students from different programs around a common project. And the third year, we make them work in applied projects with the industry. And the fourth, we ask them to say who you are or who you have become. Or who you are and you didn't know before. Because
Who you want to dress.
and who you want to be in the future. And yeah, who you want to dress. Then from this path, something new can come out, or maybe not. Who was behind had a second chance, like other programs. Like you are not the perfect star designer or super creative person, but you are more into management and you find that you find pleasure also in management, then it's design management. So in the second year, you could change. You know, in this way, you fill the industry with people who are prepared, you teach them how to work together, and you should, because I don't see any, not even a single job in fashion where you can work alone, actually. Not even if you are a great designer. Sooner or later, you have to show what you did. So, and to show to someone, you know. So there's a lot, and it's, you know, and I think the key here, just for respecting the theme of the debate, how to fill the gap between industry and education, is education brought the industry inside. I think the industry should bring education inside.
I agree.
I think, you know, there's initiatives with certain schools where they actually are going into companies right now and not really consulting, but really educating their employees. Like, they're coming up with curriculums for their employees, and there's an absolute need for that in every way. To the previous point of if fashion is still a dream, and then to Sam's point about the nostalgia of it, you know, for me, it's really about us as an industry embracing and pushing a limit that's so crazy outside of it, with like you know, I think with the level of nostalgia, we do look back so much. And how cool would it be if you have educators that are bringing in sci-fi authors into a workshop once, and, you know, going, you know, having a group of sci-fi authors talk about what they think the clothing of the future would look like. Things like that are the things we should start trying to do. I think about the Twilight Zone episode all the time. It was this Twilight Zone episode where at age 16, you got to go to this place and you got to pick what outfit you wanted to wear and what you wanted to look like, so you no longer would look like yourself. At age 16, the girls had 4 different ways they could look, and the boys had 4 different ways they could look. And it was because they were thinking this, and they had this outfit that they all wore, and that was the Twilight Zone. And so that's what they thought the future would be like. Obviously, it's not like that, but, you know, what if we welcome in people from these other areas and go, what do you see the future of fashion being, and how crazy is it?
Super. I think we can close the debate. I only have one question for each of you, and then we have a conclusion. Is beauty still the key and the drive for fashion, or is it ugliness?
I think beauty is, it's a cliche, but it's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Anything can be seen as being beautiful if it's pictured in the right way. Or if it's seen, like, someone could view something as, like, I could look at something and think it's beautiful, and you could look at it and think it's
Exactly, I agree.
So it's...
I think
is beauty still the drive?
I think it's the imagination. At the end of the day, it's... as an artist, you can create something people have never seen before. You take them to another world, and then it's no longer necessary whether something is ugly or beautiful. It's about creating something we don't know.
Beautiful.
I believe that's still possible.
Yeah. Beautiful. And beauty, what are you thinking about beauty?
I'm thinking about beauty that, you know, that there are different ways of looking about beauty, and different cultures look at beauty in different ways. So it's very difficult to say what beauty is.
Do we still look
for beauty?
No, look. If we are in front of a painting, it's the guide who tells us what we have to see. But do we look?
I think some people look.
The capacity to
I
look?
think so. And actually, just because so many people are told what to do, I again have faith that the young generation and the native digital generation will become very careful at that. I'm very positive about the future, in fact.
Oh, that sounds good.
Wow.
Yes. Christine,
Yeah.
to end the debate, sounds great. How do people look at magazines?
Hopefully,
No,
they still
my
do.
question was different.
The beauty.
The beauty.
Shall I answer both questions?
Yes.
I still believe in beauty, but my beauty has so many different faces, and I think beauty without ugliness is not beauty. So I think we need both.
Yes.
Just to still discover. And then I can only say that I wish that people or my readers still know about the beauty of printed paper and the smell of
that's
paper.
very personal. Agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Danilo, ugliness is beauty?
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, wait, because it depends. No, but it depends on the place and the time you look at it.
Yes.
Let's say that so this is the objective answer. It depends. But the personal answer, because in the end, maybe something personal, I think what we are living today is an ugly beauty. Instead, we would need a beautiful ugliness, which is the driver for change, the driver for fashion to start a new wave. You know, this is what we need now.
And you have the last word. Are we searching for beauty?
Yes, and I think we see it more not in the materialism way of beauty. I think that now we have a world where we're searching for it in such a self-reflective way that beauty is now the quiet space in between words, those quiet moments in nature, those quiet moments, and that's where we're finding our beauty now, which is why we no longer can say that this is beautiful and this isn't. And I think that because we're still there searching for it every day that we wake up.
Thank you. So there is hope, and there is hope in education. You want the last word?
No, I don't want the last word.
Oh,
Good, I didn't want it.
What I actually said then actually just made me think about something which scared me, is that when I said we both see things differently, from like I might see something that I think is beautiful and you might not think it's beautiful, do you think it's worrying now that probably a lot of people are looking at something based off the perceptions of what someone else has seen, for example, social influencers, saying that this is beautiful, and they may not instinctively think it's beautiful, but they force themselves to do.
To think so, yeah.
And that's what's worrying about beauty.
I spent my entire life as an adolescent not thinking I was beautiful because of the world that told me that it was not me.
Yeah.
So no, to your point, it's just magnified now, right? Like I didn't start to like how I even perceived myself until I was 32. So that was 5 years ago. I'm in the slow lane.
But I think that is I don't want the last. But that means as well that it's about knowledge and your own vision, because then you have your own point whether something is beautiful or ugly, and you are also, you have the faith that you can say that. And I think that is what we miss right now, that we have a lot of followers and not the ones that say, okay, I do this.
Okay, so there is hope, there is positive ending, there is a dream, so I think we can go on to educate and to do the business. Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here and for having listened to this great bunch of people with a lot of experiences. And I'm sure we will meet again to implement what we were saying. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you.